Hey there, welcome to another video, and today I have something a little bit different. As you probably have noticed, I'm someone who likes to hear music and someone who likes to review said music. And that's because at the beginning of the year I set myself a challenge of hearing an album every single day. And in the beginning of February I decided to actually start posting videos with those reviews. I set myself the goal of doing that for 1,000 days. And we are not even close to finishing, but we have actually reached the milestone, the 100-day mark, basically 10% of the way there. So I decided, you know what, I want to go over all of the reviews I've done, give just, a couple like little thoughts here and there, and see if my vibe meter was correct, because my vibe meter is mostly just based on, well, vibes, that's why I call it a vibe meter, and sort of talk about my relationship to the music that I've heard, what I think about it now that some time has passed and whatnot. So let's get to it. Day 1, The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me. This was the album that started it all. While I enjoyed some songs and found it overall very solid, I gotta say the album didn't really push me to go back and listen to it. As a whole, I still maintain the same opinion, and the album is good, but there seems to be something that just hasn't clicked with me yet. So I gave it a 7 out of 10, and I think I'll keep that 7 out of 10. Day 2, Blackwater Park. This is an album I have always had in high regard, and making this review just allowed me to yap about it. Truth is, this was not the first, second or third time listening to this album. It's one of those absolute all-time favorite albums that I have, and I just really wanted to talk about it. It's an album I keep coming back time and time again, and every song can easily carry the album on its own. I gave it a 10 out of 10, and that 10 out of 10 has just strengthened over time. Day 3, Scary Kids, Scaring Kids. Back when I started doing these reviews, I was listening to a lot of songs from this album that I remembered from, way back in the day. And yes, this album is as emo as it gets, and personally, one of the best. I gave it an 8 out of 10 due to some songs and, the album transitions not being like the best, I guess, and sort of somewhat not keeping the vibe intact. But personally, I think I might have been a little bit too harsh regarding that, since I actually kept listening to a lot of the songs in the album, and I still do. So right now I think it would be more deserving of maybe a 9 out of 10 rather than an 8 out of 10. Day 4, Parasomnia. Truth be told, this is an album I should have heard more, and yet as soon as I was done with it, I kinda just never really got back to it. I still think it's a good album, and I still think that it will be a good listen, especially if I, want to have that sort of nostalgic, Portnoy era back again. But yeah, just not something that I found very interesting, considering that Dream Theater already have a very, very expensive discography, and a very good one at that. So I think I agree with my 7 out of 10. Day 5, Need for Speed Underground 2 soundtrack. So when I said that I was doing albums, I didn't just mean albums, as I think OSTs are also really important. I play a lot of video games, and OSTs are part of a lot of the music I listen to. Underground 2 has to have one of the most iconic soundtracks of any video game, and honestly, deservingly so. This was the introduction to a lot of electronic and metal music for a lot of people, and artists they had on this were absolutely stacked. Some of which I would later go on to make reviews about, such as Rise Against, Queens of the Stone Age, or Mudvayne. I gave it a 9 out of 10. Don't exactly recall why, but I think I'll keep that score. Personally, as many good songs as it does have, some of the hip-hop songs still aren't my favorite, and that's kind of my thing. I don't think the hip-hop songs are necessarily bad, it's just I don't really listen to a lot of hip-hop, so I think a 9 out of 10 is pretty fair for this. Day 6, My Teenage Dream Endeth. Weirdly, I still remember this album and the singing, but not the actual songs. I gave this album a 6 out of 10, and I think that's fine. As much as I appreciate people trying to express themselves artistically, I also think that you need to have a specific mindset to digest and engage with it, which back then I only really had so much of. Vibe meter is more of a measure of how much an album, actually awaken a certain or woke a certain interest in me, or how much like I enjoy that in the moment after listening to it, regardless if it's like a good album or not. And honestly, this album did that, so I probably would raise the score nowadays, as I do think that it was a very interesting album to listen to, even if I'm not exactly going back to re-listen to it anytime soon. So I probably would raise the score to like a 7 out of 10. Day 7, Metropolis Part 2, Scenes from a Memory. I gave this a 10 out of 10. Doing this review made it so I came back to the album, and I have been weaving songs from it here and there every other day pretty much. It's an amazing album, and it's hard to believe that it even exists. It's so approachable from a casual perspective, it's somewhat dated, but it's also ageless, and it honestly showcases the talent from Dream Theater. It's somehow very technical and showcases how good of musicians the band is, but it's also the type of album that you can show to anyone and most people are gonna like it. You know, overall I really appreciate the narrative in it, I really appreciate the fact that it's a concept album. I think it's a very, very, very deserved 10 out of 10. Day 8, Actual Life 1. I gave this album a 9 out of 10, mostly because interludes just weren't for me. All in all though, I love the songs, and the studio live performance it did is what really made this album in an absolute masterpiece for me. Had I reviewed only that, I would easily have given it a 10 out of 10, and the same goes for this album. It's weird how such simple music can make you feel so like unique, but he managed to not just create unique music that can be easily enjoyed and you can easily connect with it, but also create a narrative and emotion above everything. When I listen to this, it's not just about listening to nice music, it's because I know I'm gonna get like emotionally hurt from it, and not every piece of music that is nice to listen to can actually achieve that. So if I were reviewing this today, and given how good the tracks actually are, I would probably give this a 10 out of 10. Day 9, A Dramatic Turn of Events. I think it's safe to say Dream Theater is one of my favorite bands. I adored this album, I gave it a 10 out of 10, and honestly, deservingly so. I think it's important that we acknowledge that Portnoy is back in the band, sure, but I actually find it really funny how people are now realizing that Mangini was actually really good. And honestly, this album was Mangini at its peak. It combines everything I loved from Scenes from a Memory, but for, more from a modern perspective. Honestly, I would not change that 10 out of 10. Day 10, 1X, yeah, more emo, so, it's actually insane how good this album actually is. I think it's easy to look back and remember the, great songs and that, really connected with you, and forget the mediocre stuff that was mostly just album filler from a lot of these emo days. And then you have 3 Days Grace with 1X. Fillers just don't really exist in this album. It's like it's top notch from one end to the other, and it was wild to be listening to it, realizing how many bangers were actually part of the same album and not different albums. Growing up and mostly watching, the commercially successful music from bands, you quickly learn that most of them are from different albums because the singles are usually what's used to sell the albums. So it was actually surreal to listen to this album and finding out that actually all of the songs here that were supposed to be the singles, or that were supposed to be like really good and represent the album, are actually all from the same album. Despite being emo, it's an album that emotionally still connects with me, and I honestly still use it as an outlet to express myself. I gave it a 10 out of 10, and honestly, I couldn't be more right. Day 11, Drop. This was the first recommendation I actually got for the channel. It's hard for me to find music on my own all the time, and while I do want to talk about stuff I already know and I already enjoy, I also want to explore new stuff. This album was the beginning of that. Well, actually, it was an EP, but still. I gave it a 7 out of 10. It was nice anime music, as I called it, and honestly, I don't actually remember much from it. It's definitely one of those that it was nice to listen to in the moment, but not so much stayed with me, so I guess I would keep a 7 out of 10, but again, I don't really recall anything from it. Day 12, Power. This was an artist I discovered because of Eurovision. It was actually insane to know he wasn't a representative for Poland when he was just absolutely amazing and his song was just incredibly well made. Ironically, 2 years later, we would actually see another opera-trained singer actually take a win, and yes, Jan also sang opera when he was younger, and that is actually so good, because his actual angelic voice makes a lot of the songs. He just has this aura to him, despite his songs not being like the most complex thing in the world. They are catchy enough, and his voice really brings the entire song together and puts him in the spotlight. It then has sort of this demeanor in the songs, the way he sings, the way he approaches things is just so convincing, so hypnotic. You cannot take your eyes, or in this case ears, off of him. And then you have just the emotional songs, which honestly for an opera singer it's the worst thing you could have, because they just completely break you. Like emotionally, they just break you entirely, right? I actually just straight up cried the first time I heard this album when it came to the song that now I'm actually not remembering the name. But still, this is an artist that I will honestly always recommend, especially if you want to get like emotionally hurt by certain songs. I gave this a 9 out of 10, and I don't even remember why, because probably I would give this a 10 out of 10 easily as I reviewed it today. It is just incredibly strong of an artist, and again, like, it's just way too good. Day 13, Control, or at least that's what I think that's the pronunciation. Anyway, this was another recommendation, more of a, I guess, E-pop slash R&B one, and honestly, it's totally not my jam. I never got back to it, although I think that had I given it a stronger shot, I would probably have connected with it more. Alas, I really haven't, and this is a genre that I don't really care that much about. I gave this a 6 out of 10, and yeah, that sounds about right, although I would probably have given it less as I reviewed it today. Again, it's just really not my jam, and I really do need it to give it a stronger shot in order to understand it better, but it's not so much that the album is bad, it's not my thing. Day 14, You All Look the Same to Me. This was, to me, a sort of like rock version of Dream Theater, at least as I remember it. It's a shame because I remember liking it quite a lot, but it hasn't really stuck with me, so I haven't heard it in a good while ever since doing the review. I gave it an 8 out of 10, but from what I remember, I actually remember it enjoying it way more than that. Sometimes I'm so caught up with other music that I end up not having more time to explore the ones I'm currently searching, and honestly, given that, if I had to listen to any album a second time to give it more time to engage with it, this would probably be the one that I would honestly consider the best candidate for it. Day 15, Riot. I recall absolutely nothing from this album aside from the fact that I liked it. I think I remember it having this issue where every song sort of like sounded the same, which contributed to me not actually remembering that much from it. I'm trusting my old self here and say that 8 out of 10 would absolutely hold up today, but again, I can't be too sure, I don't really remember it. Day 16, Message Bottle. Japanese rock is honestly very funny, and this is just more of it. I remember this album being absolutely like really long with 20 plus songs. Personally, I don't actually recall much about the music, but I actually recall my reaction to it, so I would say that at least something stuck with me, which I'm honestly glad about, you know. Sometimes music is more about the journey you went through than actually knowing the songs or remembering the songs themselves. Day 17, The Getaway. So, Red Hot Chili Peppers are one of my favorite bands, and this album is overall very underrated by the fans. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and I think that tracks. However, I remember it being somewhat of a sort of fever dream in a way. This album gives you a certain levity that I don't really have with many other albums. I would say this album is like fine wine, honestly. If it were today, maybe I would give it a higher score, but still, a 9 out of 10 is a really good score, so I think I'll maintain that for now. Day 18, Mother Earth, Within Temptation, another album recommendation. I gave this a 6 out of 10, but truth be told, I would probably go much lower. From what I recall, it just wasn't that good, or rather, like, I mean, it might be good, but this really did not grab me or like engage me in any way, shape or form. It's a shame, since this is exactly the type of stuff I should probably be a sucker for, and yet the album just didn't do it for me. Day 19, We Are the Night, another album recommendation, and this time around I gotta say, I kept listening to stuff from it. The Pills Won't Save You Now, just completely it's different when you are really like feeling it, when you're really in the mood for it. Needs to be said, the Chemical Brothers definitely entered my really good artists, I should check out more stuff from them list. I gave this a 9 out of 10, and honestly, I don't actually remember if it deserves that or not, or, you know, maybe an 8 out of 10 or even a 10 out of 10, I don't actually remember that well. well. All I know is that I did keep listening to some songs and they were really good, and I remember just my time with the album being just really, really good. I remember being very interested by it, so even if I didn't listen to a lot of the songs later on, bar a couple, I still think the album deserves the 9 out of 10. Day 20, Songs for the Deaf. Yet again, this should be the type of stuff I enjoy, and yet I gave this a 5 out of 10. While it did have a song or two I enjoyed, I would also say I might have been a bit generous with the score. Hard to say, as the only thing I remember from these are the, I guess, quote-unquote, like comedic segments and interludes from the songs, and I use comedic here very lightly because I truly did not enjoy that. That was so unbelievably aged today, and it just aged incredibly horrible. Day 21, Option Paralysis. I gave these a 7 out of 10, called it I Like Noise, and moved on. I don't actually recall anything from it aside from the fact that I actually did indeed like the stuff on it, so I guess that's a win? Day 22, Deliverance. More Opeth. Unfortunately, coming off of Black Water Park, really made me not enjoy this album as much. I gave this an 8 out of 10, even though I have a very negative view of this album before actually doing the review. Personally, I think the score is fine, although I haven't really heard anything from it, and in my view, it has gone a bit more negative again. I'll keep the score here because I'm trusting my past me, but I really had this problem where I was really disappointed, and that I think just spelled the negative emotion I have towards the album, when in reality, I don't think it really deserves that negative emotion as I had. Still, it's nowhere near close Blackwater Park. Day 23, Elements Part 1. Power metal. I gave these an 8 out of 10, but honestly, I think it should be higher. I don't listen to power metal often, but when I do, I usually have a lot of fun, and I think this, First Elements album is just overall very, very good, and something that I tend to listen a lot when it comes to power metal. Day 24, Elements Part 2. Yeah, honestly, it's kind of the same as Part 1. Ironically, ended up saying the same thing during the review, but still, I do prefer Elements Part 1 way more. I think I'm way more familiar with it, especially from games like Guitar Hero, or in my case, Guitar Flash, the browser Guitar Hero clone game. Day 25, Distance Over Time, and we're back to Dream Theater. I gave this a 6 out of 10, and honestly, my perception of this album is usually very negative. It's hard to say if I would give it anything less or more nowadays. Personally, I'm leaning less. It's weird seeing people enjoy this album so much nowadays, since when it released, it didn't really have the best perception, and honestly, personally, on that level, I don't really enjoy it too much. It's the type of album that, I'll listen if someone puts it on the background, but it's not good enough for me to search for it or actually really pay attention to it. Day 26, After Dark, DZP from Scary Kids Scaring Kids. Sometimes it's actually cool to see how bands progress. Back then I gave this a 6 out of 10 given how rough it was, and I gotta agree. I don't recall everything from it, but I do remember some parts, and usually it's the worst ones. Overall, still a fine EP, especially considering the fact that it was their first. It had flashes of brilliance, but their self-title is just superior in every way, which actually builds off of this, so I can understand it. Day 27, When We All Fall Asleep, Where Do We Go? This was somewhat out of my wheelhouse, as I usually don't listen to a lot of pop, and when I do, it's gonna be like sugary pop. Personally, I never actually digged Billie Eilish because of how many popular, I guess, her songs were. So when I heard this, I was actually very surprised by its quality. I'm so used to pop being super popular and me just sitting there I don't get why this is popular, but honestly, this album just was not that. By far the most interesting thing was the unique way that everything sounded, and being able to actually recognize that her singing isn't just a quirky way to, sing, but it actually did contribute to the atmosphere that the songs were actually going for. With all of that being said, I haven't exactly heard much from the album since, which is a shame, as I gave it an 8 out of 10, and I think it's a deserved one, but at the same time, I think the perception from this album, from me at least, I think it would be higher nowadays. Day 28, Sweet Nothings. Pliny's work is something I discovered due to YouTube and something I always enjoyed. I find it really cool how a math rock artist is capable of making things sound so approachable. When it comes to subgenres that mostly focus on technique, I feel it's really easy to just forget the songs are supposed to be engaging. Pliny does it really well, where somehow his songs clearly have a lot of thought put into them, but they also are able to be enjoyed very well given the narrative and atmosphere they create. They are really good at provoking imagination above everything. I gave these a 10 out of 10, and honestly, it's the best EP out of the trilogy. It's very well deserved and my go-to EP whenever I need math rock in my playlist, and not even when I need math rock in my playlist, just when I want to like have a chill, somewhat happy, vibe in my life. Day 29, Other Things. Selenium Forest was the YouTube recommendation that made me listen to Pliny. Back when I first came across it, I found it very unique since I never have heard anything like it before. I gave it a 8 out of 10, and I think I gotta disagree with myself here. While yes, in my opinion, it does not achieve the vibe level that the other two EPs actually have, it's still a phenomenal EP, and I would probably give it a 9 out of 10, especially considering the context of the trilogy tying everything together, if not honestly a 10 out of 10. Day 30, the end of everything. Ironically, it's the end of the trilogy. This brings it all together, and this is my other go-to EP aside from Sweet Nothings whenever I need that, I guess, sweet vibe. Actually, more like when I need the vibes and when I actually need to get inspiration going, because yeah, these EPs are really just good at making you imagining things. They really create this sort of motivation for you to, and this groundwork for you to be really good at just imagining things, as I mentioned on Sweet Nothings. These EPs were actually able to create a sense of making me imagine what it's like to be a wombat out there in space and what cool things you might actually find. Which is actually saying a lot considering it's a subgenre made for nerds who want to use their math skills in art. I gave it a 10 out of 10, and honestly, deservingly so. With how much I keep coming back to these two EPs specifically, I think I probably would be giving them even higher than 10 out of 10. They really just expand what music could actually do in my head. Day 31, Brooklyn/Oakland. This was another recommendation and a bit of a bizarre one. This was a mix of atmospheric electronic beats with melodic singing. The sound was very rough around the edges, but somehow it was very interesting. This was one of those albums that I really haven't bothered to go back to, but definitely helped expand my horizons when it comes to music. It was a defining experience, and even though I gave it a 7 out of 10, I think I value what I got out of it way more than the album itself. Still, I think I would maintain that score. Day 32, Van, and it's Clowncore, another great YouTube suggestion from what I recall. Super short album, and honestly, this is just noisecore. Weirdly, I go back to it sometimes to hear their songs. It's like they are perfect YouTube shitposting, but some parts of the songs are actually genuinely really good. I gave it a 7 out of 10. I think that's pretty on point, but I think the score here is really not the most important part of it. Day 33, Clowncore. More Clowncore. Yeah, I was so intrigued by the previous album that I just had to go for another one, and I did. I gave this one a 5 out of 10. I'm actually not sure why, I'm going to be honest, as I don't really remember a lot of it. Regardless, these two albums stand as a noisecore experience that, shitposting can be a truly beautiful thing. Day 34, One More Light. I grew up listening to Linkin Park, so why not start with one of their most controversial albums, One More Light, and the last one before Chester unfortunately passed away. It was an album I enjoyed more than I thought I was going to enjoy, but still not a defining Linkin Park experience I grew up listening to. It was nice to hear how vulnerable a lot of the songs were, even if they didn't exactly have that heaviness people expect. Either way, as I've mentioned, the heaviness to me comes from their contrast between the melodies and the lyrics, so in a way this album actually is really heavy, and the song One More Light really just steals the show. It's a song I keep coming back to when I want to get hurt emotionally. It's that good at doing that. I gave this a 6 out of 10, and I would say that's about right. It does a lot of right things, it has some banger songs, but being more of a personal album for the band, there were a lot of songs that didn't connect with me, and that's kind of the issue with these more personal albums, is that if the songs don't connect with you, the sounds don't really tend to carry it alone. Day 35, Rob Scallon, a musician turned YouTuber. I got Anchor EP recommended to me, and that's how I found out about his YouTube. Much like Ishkanito, it's all about solo guitar, sometimes electric, sometimes acoustic. This was yet again a turning point on how I thought music could be played, and honestly I loved his explanation of essentially thinking about playing guitar as if he was playing a piano. Despite the stripped down nature of the songs, they are overall very good. I gave this one a 6 out of 10, but the best songs would later make their way to other albums and EPs, so I would say it really was not a waste of time. Day 36, If I Can't Have Love, I Want Power. Another pop album. I gave this one a 7 out of 10, and I think that's correct. While I enjoyed it in the moment, it's an album I mostly forgot everything about. Not every piece of music needs to stick with you, but I do remember the time I was listening to it, to review it, was actually quite nice and enjoyable, so I'll keep the score. Day 37, Kill 'Em All. Yes, the first Metallica album, finally, and honestly, it sounded really rough around the edges. That aside, it was a very good album and one I keep coming back to simply because it has that weird, raw, unfiltered energy no other Metallica album has. It has that energy, it's that energy that the album actually has that I honestly keep cherishing it even today. Right, I would say that my 8 out of 10 is spot on, although maybe I would give it a bit of an higher score if I was reviewing it today, because again, like that raw energy is really something that stuck with me. Day 38, Actual Life 2. I mean, I don't want to extend myself again here since I already talked about Fred again, and here it's pretty much the same scenario as Actual Life 1. I gave it an 9 out of 10, I would probably give it higher just based on the songs alone. I will say, however, the studio live version that he did for this album does not beat the first one. Day 39, The Rise and Fall of a Midwest Princess. Chappelle Rowan got massively popular these past 2 years, and honestly, within reason. Remember me saying I like to listen to pop when I need something sugary? Well, this couldn't be more spot on. The cheekiness overall, the catchiness, and you're in a better mood instantly. It's perfect to just sing along to. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and again, I probably would go higher. There's so many songs I keep hearing after the review, it's just as joy to listen to them, so I think I would probably just bump the score to 9 out of 10. Day 40, Shadow of the Colossus soundtrack. I don't review many soundtracks, which honestly is a shame, but I appreciate them quite a bit. Shadow of the Colossus is no different. The grandiose approach the soundtrack has fits the game perfectly and makes your fights feel so epic. On top of that, there's some really catchy bits that just stick with you. I think the quieter atmospheric songs are pretty underrated since they are really good as well, but the fight songs are just where the power really is at. I usually put them on even if it's just to have something on the background. Also, Swift Horse has to be one of the best songs in the entire soundtrack, alongside the absolute underrated gem that is Prayer. I gave this a 10 out of 10, and honestly, that's pretty on point. Day 41, The City Sleeps in Flames. More Scary Kids Scaring Kids. This time it was the first full-length album. Going to be honest, I don't recall anything from it. I know it made sense as it showed the transition from the rawness of the EP to the more melodic-centric songs that you would then have in the self-titled, but again, the self-title just did everything better. As such, the self-title is the one I usually go back to when I actually need that sort of like emo in my life, while this album I just sort of heard it for the review and never really touched it again. Day 42, Talkie Walkie. This was a recommendation and one I'm very fond of. I gave this a 9 out of 10, and while I haven't gone back to listen to any song on it, it did put Air on my radar. Given the time, I would actually definitely listen to this album again, as I know I'm going to enjoy it. I find it funny going back how I slowly gravitated to electronic music that has interesting sounds and is more atmospheric in nature. While I did not go back to this album, I feel like it's just a question of time. On top of that, I did go on to explore more of their discography. Day 43, Ride the Lightning, more Metallica, and a 10 out of 10. And I mean, look, it's one of the classics and personally my favorite. Here Metallica managed to combine the energy from Kill 'Em All with the more melodic and composed approach, which resulted in an absolute masterpiece. It did lose some of that sheer raw energy it had, but it was a trade-off for something honestly better. While I don't listen to Metallica much anymore, I used to listen to this album all the time, so a 10 out of 10 is absolutely deserved. Day 44, The Real Thing, Faith No More, another recommendation. I did know the famous song from this album but never heard anything else from them, and that was rectified with this, and I'm glad I did. This is super funky and I enjoy the funkiness of it a lot. From time to time I still listen to some songs, especially Falling to Pieces. Falling to Pieces is an amazing song and a very underrated part of the album in my opinion. I just love the overall energy mixed with how prominent the bass is. The bass is incredibly good in this album. This was a huge contributor for me to start rating the bass much more highly. I gave it an 8 out of 10 and I think I'll stick with that, as there were some songs that just weren't as impressive to me, especially that Warpix cover, but still, it's a very good album. Day 45, 3 Days Grace. After 1X, I decided to go for their first album, the self-titled. I gave it a 9 out of 10 because it's that much of a banger, honestly. Obviously, since it's the first album, there are some songs and some parts of the songs that are a bit more, I guess, let's call them experimental and not as polished, so I would say the 9 out of 10 is correct. Ironically, even though I loved 1X, there were actually periods where I was listening to songs from this album more than I did the 1X ones. I found some more cool songs from 3 Days Grace, and I'm glad I did. It's the right choice to explore more of their discography, and their consistency is why they stood the test of time, while many other emo bands just kind of either phased out or just outright changed their sound. Day 46, By the Way. Red Hot Chili Peppers again, and this was one of their first albums I actually listened to in full length way back in the day. Not even just theirs, just in general. I honestly had forgotten how good the album is, and the summer vibes on it are completely immaculate. While I have somewhat gravitated away from Red Hot Chili Peppers, I cannot state how much I heard this album in my teenage years. That's probably the reason why I enjoy weird sounds nowadays, as Red Hot Chili Peppers is a very weird sound band for sure, comparatively speaking to other rock bands. When I do decide to spin Red Hot Chili Peppers, this album is always an option. It's just so much funkier and noisier than what they did after, so it's usually a matter of deciding what vibe I'm feeling at the moment. Am I feeling outgoing summer or shy autumn, and that usually spells what album I go for. Day 47, A Beautiful Lie. We all know the shit show that 30 Seconds to Mars is. In fact, nowadays the band only has 2 members, the 2 brothers, and it's much poppier than emo. With that in mind, it's actually insane how good this album is, just through and through. Much like the 3 Days Grace 1X album, this album not only was amazing when it came out, it stood the test of time as one of the best emo experiences you can have, while also being somewhat distinct from the rest. Gave it a 10 out of 10, honestly deserved, as there isn't a single miss here. While I don't listen to 30 Seconds to Mars anymore, if I do, it's always something from this album, as usually it's the one that I actually have the melodies stuck in my head. Day 48, Eyes Closed. Alias was an artist I reviewed earlier on due to recommendation, but it was an album made alongside a singer. Alias is a producer and provides the electronic elements. So what happens when he is alone in an album? Well, atmospheric shit happens. While again, it's an album I haven't really come back to listen anything from, I did enjoy my time with it quite a bit. I find it interesting how much of my experience has just been equivalent to just ships passing in the night to never be seen again, but still glad that I got to saw them at least once. Day 49, Window Leaker, the first Aphex Twin. I always heard nerds online talk about how good this guy is apparently, it's so great or whatever, so I decided to review an EP and give it a shot. This was a relatively short EP, so I hadn't really that much to lose with it. And it wasn't very good, as I gave it a 6 out of 10. Nowadays though, I have heard so much more Aphex Twin and I think it has finally clicked with me, to the point where I actually have heard some songs from this album again, or this EP rather, and I kinda understand where they are coming from and why people actually enjoy this EP so much. Today I would probably give it a much higher score than a 6 out of 10. Day 50, Saturate, the first of Breaking Benjamin, a band I'm actually quite fond of alongside 3 Days Grace as the peak of emo. This album was a 5 out of 10 and a bit of a miss for me. It did not sound like what I currently know of Breaking Benjamin, which honestly was a shame. Ironically, I did play Forever, the last song on the album, quite a bit, despite being the most different song in the album, so I guess that even from a 5 out of 10, I got something really good out of it. Day 51. Time. Infected Rain was a band I randomly discovered while listening to YouTube or to music on YouTube. I gave this an 8 out of 10 and remember enjoying it, although it's something I never really went back again for, which is a shame because I remember enjoying it quite a bit. This is part of the albums I would actually listen to again if given time, and probably I will in the future. Day 52, Jar of Flies. For an EP, this was actually pretty long. Alice in Chains is a band that, like many others, I found 1 or 2 cool songs on YouTube but eventually had to go and listen to the rest. I think as far as grunge goes, they are exceptional, and especially on this EP. It's an EP I come back to when I want to listen to this type of music alongside Dirt, another EP, which I'm actually not sure if I've reviewed yet or not, but I definitely will in the future. Either way, I think the 9 out of 10 is completely deserved, honestly, if not more. Day 53, Rat Taxi. YouTube really loves recommending me good stuff and this album is no exception. I clicked on it because I actually thought it was a video game OST, and honestly it's super funky and an album I consistently still listen to. The 10 out of 10 is more than deserved on this one, this is absolute fire. Day 54, Magma. Gojira is one of those bands that is super unique in terms of their sound, and Magma was a bit of a deviation based on what they did before. Still, it was yet another YouTube recommendation that I absolutely adored and still do. This album keeps aging really well, and while I understand it's not for everyone as it doesn't have the same heaviness as previous albums, it does excel in its uniqueness. I would say the 9 out of 10 is well deserved. Day 55, Slipknot, an 8 out of 10, and not sure why as I remember this album quite fondly. I still listen to a lot of the songs on it, it's pretty much the same case as Kill 'Em All, it is far more raw than later albums and the energy is on point, so I would probably say it deserves an higher score, but at the same time I don't exactly remember every song that album had, so it's a bit hard to say. Day 56, Images and Words, Dream Theater back again. Yeah, I love them I guess. This was one of the first albums they actually put out, I think it was the third one in fact, and it is very much 80s rock. Despite that, I think it shows the best that that era of rock actually has to offer. I don't really listen to it, as if I actually want to listen to this type of rock, I usually go for Sins from a Memory, which is to me a much superior album. This album however does have something that Sins from a Memory does not have, and it's the fun element. Day 57, Sorceress. Opeth is another band I absolutely adore, if you haven't noticed by now how many albums I've reviewed from them, and honestly, if it wasn't evidently enough, I discovered them the same year I did Gojira, thanks to their Sorceress album. The reality is, while I do enjoy this type of rock, I did feel that it was too out of focus given what Opeth usually does. I do think a 6 out of 10 is perhaps a bit too harsh, as it did have some banger songs, but I can say it's an album I go back to much outside a song or two, and even then I honestly prefer Pale Communion, which is the album that I actually really got attached to when it comes to Opeth. Day 58, The Unraveling. Rise Against is another band that I absolutely adore, but with them I never actually cared about albums. This was the first album they actually put out, a punk album, and an album I gave a 4 out of 10. The reason, it sounded really rough, and it totally wasn't the Rise Against I actually know nowadays. It was a complete miss, even if I appreciate what they were going for, I would say that my 4 out of 10 is pretty on point. Day 59, The Hunting Party. Oh boy, we have more Linkin Park, and this has to be one of the worst, if not the worst Linkin Park album out there. I gave it a 4 out of 10, and honestly, rightfully so. Outside of a single song I usually play, the rest I just couldn't really care much about. Only things I remember from this album are the very mediocre songs that were used to promote other entertainment media, which I found overall kinda cringe and really forced, and honestly, I still do. Nowadays, I probably would have given it even lower of a score, considering the mix on it was also really rough from what I remember. Yeah, honestly, it's a shame because Linkin Park usually has pretty good mixes. They 60, Meshuggah is, you guessed it, a band I found on YouTube. While I know, this EP is actually infamous since it's only one song that is 24 minutes long. It's an EP that is a bit all over the place with multiple approaches to it and honestly just sounds kinda random at points. I gave this an 8 out of 10, guessing because of the boldness of it all. It is however an EP I haven't checked again and I mostly prefer other Meshuggah songs, so it's hard to say if that 8 out of 10 would stand today. Probably I would maybe lower the score. They 61, Irony is a dead scene. Speaking of noise, here's more noise. This is from a band I reviewed already called Dillinger Escape Plan. They had this 4-song EP that quite frankly was just noise and I enjoy noise. I gave this a 7 out of 10, but honestly I haven't really listened to anything on it again. I appreciate how different it is and that's probably why I would keep the score around that mark, but it's one of those where I enjoyed my time with it, chances are I'm not gonna go back. Day 62, Come to Daddy. Aphex Twin has to have the worst album fucking names out there. I gave this EP a 9 out of 10 and, you know, it's understandable to see why. It's what it made click for me. I didn't understand Aphex Twin before. After this, I really did. It was thanks to this EP that I understood why people enjoy Aphex Twin so much. Aside from the usual interesting sounds he makes, this song, Flim, was actually replayed quite frankly a lot. I'm glad that I gave it a shot despite Window Licker not being that great when I first heard it, as it allowed me to, again, gain a new perspective on Aphex Twin and IDM. With that being said, I think I'll maintain that 9 out of 10 purely because not every song was necessarily super amazing, and let's be honest, 2 of them were just covers, but honestly, Flim could carry the entire fucking EP on its own. They 63, Analord 10. With the impact Flim had on me, I just had to taste a bit more of Aphex Twin, and Analord 10 is an EP that has 2 songs. Yeah, no wonder his discography is so damn long. He ended up making other ones, but this was the first one as far as I'm concerned. Personally, I gave it an 8 out of 10, as I honestly was enjoying this sort of, I guess, acid techno quite a bit, and the fact that this was all done in analog stuff is actually quite impressive. I have not really played it that much, but it is an EP I know I can come back to and enjoy. They 64, Homework. Speaking of electronic music, here's Daft Punk. I love Daft Punk and this album is no exception. This is French house at its best. Of course I gave it a 9 out of 10 as the album was just overall very solid and it's an album that is still part of my music rotation. If I need some nice funky electronic music, usually Around the World is what I come back to. The slight changes in sound here and there really just grab the song from being a crazy frog repetitive until it kills you to a more subtle and well thought out execution, which is, very much appreciative. My perception is that this album is actually better when I reviewed it, so it's actually hard to say if the score would improve where it is if I were to review it today, but still, it's one of the best electronic albums I've heard, so maybe I would probably bump it to a 10 out of 10. Day 65, Plastic Bitch. I gave this album 2 scores, 8 out of 10 and 9 out of 10, and I must say I lean way more to the 8 out of 10 side, if not even lower. Look, I know it had a lot of great songs that I still enjoy, songs that I still listen to, but it also had some not so stellar songs, it had some mid-filler songs. Personally, the misses really are a miss, but the hits really carry the entire thing. Empire Ends is still an insane song and Melancholy Hill is part of the song playlist that I have when I need to get emotionally hurt by music. So I think an out of 10 is honestly more accurate for how I feel about this album. Day 66, Toxicity, which I always call Toxic City for some reason. System of a Down is a band that honestly it's really insane. They are phenomenal and as far as metal goes, they have a pretty unique sound. Alongside, by the way, this was the other full-length album I bothered listening to when I was a teenager. You gotta understand that we either listened to the radio or we just passed specific songs to each other. Most of us had no idea what an album was, and even when it seemed boring, or when we did, it seemed boring to actually listen to the whole thing, when you can just, hear the specific songs you enjoy over and over. Thing is, with this album, every damn song can be that song. It's an amazing album and the one that people usually tend to turn to when discussing System of a Down. Needless to say, this is an album I come back to every so often, and lately I've actually been playing the song Dear Dance quite a lot. Day 67, The Benny the Bear. Another band I found out because of YouTube, although not this album actually. This album was very rough and the 5 out of 10 seems quite right on the money. The Benny the Bear have a very unique dynamic, one we won't ever really be seeing again due to the fact that one of the vocalists, the bear, actually passed away. But honestly, it's a band that I will cherish forever. There is just some hypnotic thing about it, and unfortunately that something is what this album actually doesn't really have that much of. So while I keep coming back to the Benny the Bear, this album is a thing I listened to once and I'm done with it. Day 68, Silence in the Snow, one of the most contentious Trivium albums and honestly one of my favorites. There's just something special about this one, and Until the World Goes Cold just fulfills the need to honestly listen to the entire album, given that that song just pretty much does the entire thing that every single other song in the album does. Still, I gave it a 9 out of 10, and honestly, I keep looking back and feeling more of an 8 out of 10 with this one, but at the same time, whenever I do listen to it, it just seems to I enjoy it way more than I actually perceive, so it's honestly hard to say. I will say though that orchestral sound in the middle of the song, it's just a bit of a stinger, and I would actually love to know what actually happened there. Day 69, The Sin and the Sentence. Yeah, I was digging Trivium quite a bit at this point, so besides Silence in the Snow, I decided to review my other favorite album from them, The Sin and the Sentence. To me, this is just Silence in the Snow, but tidier and heavier. I can come to this album, listen to any song and enjoy it. It's an amazing album and one that I will keep listening to. Trivium just have this weird energy to them where they're not quite thrash in the sense of Metallica energy, but they're also not super heavy, sort of like Gojira. They're just somewhat right in the middle of it all. Day 70, Lost and Found. Mudvayne was a band that I discovered because of YouTube. Or well, not actually, since the Need for Speed Underground 2 soundtrack actually had a song from them, so I already knew them before realizing, but yeah, I only grasped their name once I was on YouTube. Yeah, honestly, I just dig their vibe quite a lot. This sort of new metal vibe with a heavy focus on energy was actually really good, and I think that energy will always be an underrated part of new metal. I mean, to a degree, if your energy is too much, I don't think people would consider you new metal anymore, so I get that, but still. Also, their bass lines are absolutely crazy. While I don't really have any wish to return to the album or anything, I do listen to some of the songs on it, and honestly, Mudvayne is the other band alongside the Benny the Bear that I just sometimes have that sort of fix that I need to listen to them. They just have honestly a sound that no other band can fulfill for me. Day 71, Averturize. This was an electronic album that was recommended to me by what I assume to be the person that made it. It is inspired by Aphex Twin, and while it didn't have clear theme, I did enjoy it. Not that I have gone back to it necessarily, but I did enjoy my time with it, and honestly I can see this artist becoming bigger in the future. It is, however, one thing that I usually have whenever I need something to put on the background, because yeah, I think it's actually really good to have on the background. Day 72, Mother. Take a guess. Yeah, another band I discovered thanks to YouTube. This album has a song I absolutely adore, so I decided to give it a full review. While I gave it an 8 out of 10, I think today I would probably go lower than that. It's hard to say though, since we have a case of the plastic bitch on our hands. The highs are high, but the lows are kinda lowish, and looking back I think the covers really put a lot more negative opinion from me on it than they actually did it good, so this album without the covers I think would just be an 8 out of 10 and I wouldn't even question it. Day 73, King of Everything. Ginger is, another band I discovered from YouTube. I know, but look, I mean, YouTube was very formative in my finding out of bands and artists. The only song I heard from this album was Pisces, and I mean, look, it's the best song in the album. I really loved how heavy but also how clean the entire album was. In a twisted sense, the closing song was actually the one that I kept replaying the most. The Beggar song. Like, don't get me wrong, I still go back to Peaches or Pisces every once in a while, but Beggar really was the song I mostly just kept playing, despite actually being the only song in the entire album that wasn't metal. And honestly, even though it didn't fit the album that much, to me it was legitimately one of the best songs in the album. I gave this a 9 out of 10, and I gotta agree with myself, for what Ginger lacked in a melody here, they more than made up for uniqueness. Day 74, Macro. So because I like Ginger so much, I decided to give a shot to another album, this time Macro. And while it's way heavier than the previous one, but to me it's just not as good. I gave this a 7 out of 10, and while I did enjoy it less than King of Everything, I also think I might have been a little bit too harsh. This album came after Micro, an EP that is, in my opinion, really important because it just ties everything together. I really enjoyed the closer, which was called Perennial, but well, the opposite, and it's an amazing song that I have just been playing over and over. Also, I know I haven't really been mentioning it, but the album art is absolutely amazing, and I think it connects so well with the song. I enjoyed so much because it really made me elevate that atmospheric sense that song carried. Day 75, Micro. Because of my blunder, I decided to keep the Ginger streak going and review Micro after Macro, and well, yeah, it's a good middle ground between King of Everything and Macro, more leaning towards the style of Macro. Perennial is also present here, and if I actually had followed the fucking logic, the version on the album actually serves as an intro, or I guess outro, depending on how you want to use it, to the song in this EP, which honestly makes a really cool two-part song. Outside of that, however, the entire EP is incredibly consistent, and honestly, the only reason why it's not an album is because it doesn't have sufficient songs in it, because as far as quality goes, it's really good. I gave this a 9 out of 10, and yeah, honestly, it's peak Ginger. Although I don't know where the other point went, I think perhaps this would actually even be higher when I actually want to listen to Ginger. I tend to listen to this EP, so I think Micro would honestly be a 10 out of 10 if I were to review it again. Day 76, Inner Party System. Yeah, I judged that this band was actually way more famous than they actually were, and that's because they were very unique, at least unique enough for me. While I still listen to Don't Stop, I can't say that the rest really grabbed me to the point where I want to keep listening to it. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and I'm unsure if that would stand today, but I know that when I listened to it, it was a really nice experience. Day 77, Worlds Collide. Yeah, Apocalyptica is really good, and this is an amazing album. All in all, I have to say, this album made orchestral instruments really approachable to me outside of OSTs, since it made them sound so much cooler. On top of that, it made me find out the original David Bowie song Heroes, which Elden is a cover of, and yeah, Heroes is actually the song I kept listening after hearing this album. I would say that 9 out of 10 stands as this album is really outstanding, and I do weave some of the songs here and there, although you can honestly listen to any of them, they are all great. Day 78, Lateralos. Tool is a band I really hadn't listened to before, even though I knew they were like really big. And well, this album kinda proves why. I honestly don't even care how good their technique or whatever is, they got this groove to them that is just so insane, and it creates such a great, like, unique sound for their songs. Even though I really didn't want to listen to this after being done with it, I kinda just did. That bassline from Schism is absolutely insane, and one of the best intro basslines I have ever heard on any song ever. So yeah, I heard the songs from this as recently as today, because that's how great the album is. I give it a 9 out of 10, and I don't understand why. Honestly, this is a clear 10 out of 10, no doubt. Day 79, The End Is Nigh. It's medieval metal. This is also a band I discovered thanks to YouTube. Yeah, again, I cannot stress how good YouTube actually is with recommendations. This album is just really solid overall. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and while yes, I was really impressed to learn about how metal can be used, because once again, this broadened my horizons when it comes to what you can do with metal. At the same time, I'm not so sure it deserves that high of a score. Like, sure, it's incredibly solid, but solid isn't really enough for me anymore. Either way, it's a really great album, and I still listen to some songs from it from time to time. Day 82. I heard people talking shit about Sleep Token online, and I decided to give them a shot, and started with the 2 EP because I was confused with the names. Either way, I gave these a solid 8, and I must ask, what the fuck, like, was I doing? Because this is easily a 10 out of 10. I have been playing every single song of this EP, and I mean, okay, sure, it only has 3 songs, but I have been playing every single song on this EP pretty much ever since I first heard it, like 3 weeks ago. It's that good and it's that unique, and this is a band that will definitely stick with me for a very long time. Day 81. 1. Of course that if I have to review 2, I gotta review 1 now. For the most part, I didn't like this EP as much as the other one, but considering how much I actually enjoy the 2 EP, that really isn't saying much. While I barely have touched this EP compared to the other one, I absolutely adore it as well. I think these 6 songs are phenomenal and encapsulate what Sleep Token really is. I also gave this one an 8 out of 10, but again, this would be much higher if I were to listen to it today. Day 82, Signalis, another OST. This was a recommendation from a game I actually have not played yet, so it was super interesting going in blind, or I guess deaf in this case. Yeah, honestly, it's a really solid OST. It's one I put occasionally on the background when working or I guess writing stuff. It is a bit more on the, I guess, uneasy side of things, but still, it is very solid. It is the first review to not have a score, probably because I actually forgot to put it in the description, so I'll give it a score now. I'll go with an 8 out of 10. Super solid OST, interesting soundscape. Hey, this is actually recording me, post-script writing me. Yeah, so I actually rated it an 8 out of 10 in the video, so I guess I'm actually pretty consistent on this one. Day 83, Something You Needed. Another recommendation, and this time is some indie rock. It's funny that this was actually supposed to be the type of band I listen to very rarely, and yet I have been playing their songs quite a lot, especially Glistening. I honestly adore that song and I love playing it occasionally. I gave this an 8 out of 10, and I would say, yeah, that's about right. It's super solid EP for a very promising band. Day 84, Heavy Colors. Because I was so enthralled by Flip Turn, I decided to hear their first EP, Heavy Colors. And while yes, it was good, at the same time it did not have that charm I associated with Something You Needed. I gave this a 6 out of 10, and honestly, I might have been a bit too harsh, but at the same time it's something I think I would enjoy a ton listening to it again. So it's a bit hard to say, like, it's good for sure, but not I'm going to seek this out type of good. Especially when other songs from the same band just do a much better job, especially, songs from Something You Needed. Day 85, Panopticon. This was yet another recommendation, but this time from very long ago. This was described to me as kinda like Opeth, and well, I mean, they kinda weren't wrong. I gave this an 9 out of 10, and yeah, it seems about right. I like the album quite a lot, and the unique sound really helps sell the atmosphere, all while having that signature prog style that bands like Opeth use. I still listen to this occasionally. Day 86, Erinias. This was yet another YouTube recommendation, one that I put on the background whenever I need to work on something. Sometimes music isn't about being flashy, it's about keeping us company, and honestly, this one does just that. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and yeah, seems about right. I think I like 8 out of 10s quite a lot, it seems. Day 87, Bruise. I actually have no clue how I arrived at this album, but I did. I don't recall much from it, like actually nothing from it at all. So I guess it deserves the 7 out of 10 I gave it. Like, seriously, I actually don't remember the album at all, so let's actually hope I did enjoy it in the moment, but yeah, it definitely did not grab me afterwards. I don't even know how I came across it, like, I don't know if it was recommended, I have absolutely no clue. They 88 Nihil. KMFDM was another recommendation and a bit of a weird one. Honestly, I found the album to be a bit all over the place, sound-wise, very rough, not very consistent. Or that is what it sounded like. In reality, the album is a banger and one I've been hearing quite a bit since I first covered it. Honestly, it has become part of my active playlist in terms of listening. I gave this an 8 out of 10, but honestly, I think I would be higher if I were to touch it nowadays. It made me very surprised and enthralled by the entire spectacle, and I loved it ever since. They 89 Duality. This was another recommendation, and the artist is part of the duo that made the Signales OST. It's an album I haven't really heard ever since I actually reviewed it, but I gave it a 7 out of 10. Personally, my perspective is a bit better than that, but it's hard to say since I haven't really listened to it ever since. They 90 Premiers Symptoms. Talkie-Walkie was good at introducing me to Air, and I wanted to check out more of their stuff, and I did. This is one of their first EPs, and goddamn, one that I vibed a lot with, and one that I still listen to. When the vibe catches you, like just the right way, it's so good. Air is an artist that I have to say, it pretty much just is on my radar, and I don't think it will ever leave. This EP is just the right vibe and it just struck the right way for me to honestly just want to check out the rest of the stuff they ever did. And the fact that they also did Talkie-Walkie and I seem to enjoy that quite a bit, I think that seals the deal. Yeah, honestly, I would say that 10 out of 10 is completely on point with this one. They 91 Shadowglow. Yep, we're going back to Flip Turn. This album pretty much encapsulated everything good from Something You Needed. Flip Turn have slowly become my comfort music and I can see why. They are indie, they sound unique, and it feels very intimate, which allows you for some introspection. It's definitely a vibe. I gave this a 9 out of 10 and honestly I don't actually remember why. My perception is that it should be lower, but at the same time I do remember the songs and honestly they are a vibe, so I'm not sure which score I would give it nowadays, but still it's an album to remember. They 92 Angst, more KMFDM. This came before Nihil and a bit of a disappointment for me. Overall it was way more like rock than that weird metal electronic mix that they had going on in Nihil, which is a shame because that weird sound is exactly what drew me into it so much. I gave this a 7 out of 10 and yeah, that sounds about right, but honestly I might have given it even lower. I don't know, it was kind of a disappointment for me that didn't have the same edge, unfortunately. They 93 Loops of Fury. Speaking of Air, another artist I gave a 9 out of 10 on their album and then never checked out again until NEP was The Chemical Brothers, and these took me really by surprise. Just forget the electronic aspects, this is just straight up breakbeat. Which, okay, it's electronic anyway, but definitely not the same vein as We Are The Night. This was so different that I was just very surprised with it. Despite that, I was actually pleasantly surprised with how solid the EP was. I gave it an 8 out of 10 and quite frankly, my perception is far higher, so I'm not sure if this score nowadays wouldn't have been higher. They 94 Eurovision 2025. A decently big project, but sure, you know, like it's not an album I guess or an OST, but I like watching Eurovision, so I decided to make a review of it because why not? Overall, I gave it a 6 out of 10, and I think that's about correct. While I have warmed up to some of the songs a bit more, frankly, I just found it weaker than previous years and way more formulaic. A lot of the songs sounded like they just tried to play on previous winners and sound bites they know people enjoy. On a different note, I'm quite surprised Australia actually didn't qualify, especially considering semifinals are all a public vote and their song was quite popular, so yeah. I have not watched the final yet, but from the spoilers I did already get, I will say I'm somewhat surprised by the results. Either way, the entire thing to me was just kind of mid, and hopefully next year brings us better music. Day 95, In Danger of Collapse. Another album sent in by a person. At this point, albums are recent enough that I still remember them, so maybe this whole idea was good at first when, I reviewed those albums like 3 months ago. But now we're kind of like, I reviewed these a few days ago, but you know what, fuck it, let's do these ones as well. This album was honestly horrible. I gave it a 6 out of 10, and I think I was perhaps a little bit too generous. I get that they were, trying to like sound bad and everything, but yeah, they definitely need that like flair that bands like Clowncore, for example, have, where they, sure, their sound is bad on purpose, but there is a sparkle to them, to their music, those moments of brilliance that draw people in. The problem here was just, there was a lot of constant repetition, but where's the shit post, where's the entertainment part, there's nothing like that. So yeah, I would probably give this album a lower score today. Day 96, WTF ? More KMFDM. This one was kind of the same as Angst, but way more electronic. Personally, I haven't bothered touching it after the review, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. I gave it an 8 out of 10, and I might have been a little bit too generous with it, but at the same time I wanted to emphasize I did enjoy it more than I did Angst, and I mean, if I gave Angst a 7 out of 10, this one has to be an 8 out of 10. But to be fair, the vibe meter is fake anyway, and I just come up with scores on the fly, so really who cares. Day 97, Raven, another recommendation. I don't generally like R&B, but this album changed that a bit. While yes, it is still R&B, it also is way more atmospheric when it comes to the approach it has to it, which honestly I really enjoyed. I gave this an 8 out of 10, and I think I'll stick to that. It's not that R&B is all of a sudden a point of interest for me, as I don't think it will ever be too much, but it's definitely helped me bridge the gap between finding no interest in it and seeing that it does have good things to offer. Day 98, Age of Aquarius, an album recommendation from YouTube, and I, finally bit the bullet and I was like, okay, sure, finally we'll click on the fucking thing you already recommended me for the past few months, these a couple of times. And it was an amazing experience. The sounds are actually very hypnotic, much like Panopticon, and I just kept hearing it after the review. I must have heard this album like 4 or 5 times since the review, like 2 days ago. I gave it a 9 out of 10, and rightfully so, but honestly, I can see myself giving it a 10 out of 10 if I were to actually review this album again. The second part of this album clicked way more with me now that I have re-listened to it way more. Day 99, Nito. Yeah, much like Rob Scallon, this is something I don't hear very often, but when I do, I enjoy it quite a bit. It's like finding a moment of peace away from everything. I gave this album an 8 out of 10, and I think that's about right, although I don't know, I feel like I appreciate it more than that, so maybe I would bump that up to like a 9 out of 10. Day 100, Even in Arcadia, the new Sleep Token album that I heard like yesterday. Yeah, look, this one is actually so recent, so I don't exactly have much experience of what it's like to, be away from it. I've been hearing Damocles quite a bit, so yeah, I guess that's something that I got from it, but honestly, compared to the 2 EPs I heard from Sleep Token, this is perhaps a little bit too focused on the hip-hop part for my taste. Still, Sleep Token is good and I enjoyed this album quite a bit. Is it an 8 out of 10? Very likely it will stay that way, but honestly, only time will tell. And that was it, 100 albums in 100 days, or well, we had EPs as well, OSTs, but you get the point, it's one piece of music for every day for 100 days. Personally, it was an amazing project that allowed me to dive headfirst into stuff I haven't heard already, as well as allowing me to talk about music I was already really passionate about and I already loved. This marks 10% of the way of my goal of 1000, and given how this went, I'm quite excited for the rest. It is clear I lean way more into metal and electronic, and I will probably keep leaning that way, and I see that I appreciate a lot of stuff when it comes to atmospheric or the stuff that creates a narrative or, a world you can imagine and immerse yourself in. I wasn't sure about starting this project, but honestly, I'm glad I did, and I've been having a lot of fun, so here's to 100 more.